Hello, welcome to the Service Management Leadership Podcast. Great return guest, David Cannon, has agreed to join us and drop pearls of wisdom once again. David, how goes it?
Very well, thank you, Jeffrey. Really good to be back again. I enjoy spending time with you on these podcasts and in person.
Oh yes, so let's go there. So David and I, over the Labor Day weekend, got a chance to spend a few hours at a coffee shop bakery place talking shop, and it was great. It was a highlight of my weekend, and so just meet David and, like I said, talk shop.
Yeah, it really was good. You don't often get that opportunity where you're not trying to sell something, you're not being sold to, you're really just talking about your experience, and that was just really cool. And I love doing that, and I love doing it with you. And I think any listeners on that podcast, you want to do the same thing, give me a call.
That's dangerous. And I have to apologize. Before, I was like always with your accent, I was assuming David was European and British. He's not, and so formal apology for me. All right. So go ahead.
At least you didn't say Australian. If you'd said Australian, you would have offended at least 3 countries there. But no, I'm South African, and a strong British connection. So I'm not too upset. In fact, I'm not upset at all.
Well, I was just, with ITIL being so British based, and you've been in this world for a long time, and so not this podcast, but in a future one, I want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody how you got into the ITIL space many moons ago. Great story. So let's dig in. One of the topics David and I talked about when we were sitting there, I was drinking my tea, he was drinking coffee, I think, right?
Yes.
Was over 2 million people, this was the stat I've heard, have been through ITIL training. ITIL 3 came out in 2008. You were one of the writers back in 2007. And the focus was on the consumer, the customer, how's value going to be delivered and consumed. I think we failed as an industry, and I'm putting myself in there. I put a we, not anybody pointing fingers, because we're worried about IT outputs and IT measures and what's best for us. How do we get this? All right, first of all, do you think that's really the case, or am I being dramatic? Second of all, how do we get it back on track?
So I think it is partly the case. Are there organizations and individuals who really do get it right and are very successful at doing this? Yes, of course there are. As an industry of 2 million or even 5 million, if you look at the foundation certificate, we would expect to see a lot more focus on outcomes and value and achieving great strides in business success. And from a service management point of view, we're not seeing a proportional uptake of these strategic areas relative to number of people who've been certified. And I think the key is in a word that you used. The word that you used is deliver value, deliver outcomes. And, I didn't realize it at the time because that's the industry we were in. IT was an in-house service provider, and still is in pretty much every organization. We haven't got to the point in many organizations where there is no IT department, maybe 1 or 2, but for the most part, IT is a department, and it is an internal service provider that delivers services. And I think in version 3, the focus was we changed it from delivering outputs or delivering services to delivering value. But I think the word delivering is a little bit misleading. It's like, well, I'm still a service provider. I deliver. I have no responsibility for what you do with that service once you've got it. And if you really want to talk about value, you have to be able to articulate what people do with the services you deliver. So it's not just about delivering value. And I think ITIL 4 is really good about this. They changed that word deliver to co-create.
Yes.
when we're in an organization, we have multiple different business units. IT is one of them, who collaborate to be able to produce and create value that makes the organization sustainable and which allows it to survive through some very difficult times. That emphasis has shifted from version 3 to version 4, and I think that will be key to organizations and individuals accelerating how they articulate value. Yeah, that was a simple question, but I have another part to the answer. I think what we're also seeing is IT professionals kind of moving into one of two directions. It's actually three, but two broad classifications. So we're seeing a bigger divide between IT professionals who specialize in technology and who generally find themselves working in the back office. And those technology professionals who focus on how that technology is used in the front lines of the business and tend to find themselves working more closely with business units. So we see, for example, product teams being created in the business with IT people on those product teams. But that's not the only example. So we see the IT profession as a whole really splitting. We now have dev and we have ops, but now we also have this back office and front office kind of classification. Back office, of course, is divided into two. It's in-house and it's outsourced, yes, mainly cloud. So we see IT professionals' careers moving in three directions: business, back office, or cloud. That's kind of where we're going. I think people who stay in the back office are going to continue focusing on delivering, and they're going to be focused on outputs. Is it available? Was it there when it was needed? At the right level of performance? They're still going to be focused on that. But this new emerging profession of business-minded IT leaders are going to be focusing on that value. What is being done once the service is delivered from IT? Are we consuming it in the best possible way? Are we improving it in the best possible way? Are we applying it to new ways of doing business, new markets, new products, new services? And IT people are becoming, I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening. When we published the version 3 service strategy, the 2011 edition, I think we were quite proud of that book. It was very much a product of its time. It's quite outdated now. But at the same time, when it was published, I think we took a look at it and said, you know what, this thing is at least 5 years ahead of its time. And I think that was correct.
Yes. I'm going to push in on two things. You are 100% right. There are certain organizations, certain people that get it and they do it awesome. I was generalizing that there are, as a whole, considering the masses of people that have gone through training and certification and even advanced, certs, to still for us to be as immature as we are seems kind of interesting. And I don't want to, I'm trying not to throw barbs at anyone, because I think it's all of our problem to solve. You know what I mean? It's not.
It's also a symptom of where we are in our industry. So we talk about maturity. That's a very interesting subject.
Yes.
We talk about maturity of an industry that is really only a few decades old. I'm not going to go into exactly how many decades, because you can go back to the 40s or you can go back to the 80s. It doesn't really matter. It's only a few decades old. Compared with professions like medicine or accounting, which are in some cases hundreds of years old. It's, we're in a stage in our industry where everything is new and it changes so quickly. We're in a stage of high innovation. And when it's high innovation, I think a couple of things happen. One is you keep thinking that the problems you have today are going to be solved by the next generation of technology. But the next generation of technology is usually developed based on an assumption that you've already solved those problems. Yeah. So we're kind of in this interesting dance where we're at a stage now where we have to go back to basics. Like, how many times do we sit down and actually identify what services do we deliver and how do we deliver them? You know, the basic service mapping that needs to be in place for every service provider is missing in many organizations because, well, we did that years ago. And, you know, we were told that the new generation of service management software was going to automatically take care of that for us. Well, it hasn't. No. So now we're sitting in a situation where we stopped doing the service mapping because we thought it was going to happen. It didn't happen. But the tools that we now use assume that your service mapping has already been done. Right. Well, so it's kind of falling between the cracks. That's just one example. Configuration management database is another good example of this. Performance forecasting is and workload management is another good example of this. You know, we take migration to the cloud, depending on which publication you read. You know, it'll be number 1 to number 5, but somewhere in the top 5 will be this problem with cloud migration is we didn't know how the cloud was going to be consumed because we didn't understand the workloads that we were going to put in there. I mean, we knew what people were going to be doing, but we didn't know how much of it they were going to be doing and when they would be doing it. And suddenly we find that we're in this, you know, in this uncontrolled over or under consumption scenario. And just because we were unable to forecast what our organization was going to do with the technology that they had access to. It's a basic, and yet it is one of the top 5 issues being faced by people who move into the cloud. Yes. We should have taken that a long time ago, but to be fair, I don't know how many times I heard, I'm not going to blame the cloud vendors, but it was generally on the vendor side. Yeah. You don't have to worry about that. We got that under control. We got the tools you need. We're going to be able to help you forecast all that stuff. You can't forecast it unless you understand the business that you're in. And no vendor can understand your business. It's your business, right? And so I think we have to kind of just reorganize and reorient ourselves to really focus on some of the basic things that need to be in place and that we've kind of neglected over the years for one reason or another. Well, and that's my opinion anyway.
I'm going to build on it because you saw me, those that are watching the video, you all that are only listening, you'll love the animated look on my face because David is so right on the service mapping. Imagine this, we are doing SLAs without knowing the service. We are, right, David? We are doing financial management or trying to without having the services mapped, which is kind of a irony in itself. Dave, please correct me on this, but we have SLAs that are basically OLAs in disguise or underpinning contracts, but they're being called SLAs, and they really are not matched to a service as much as they are outsource some process activity or how many calls, how many the resolution time, call abandonment. Those are being called SLAs, but they're really part of an underpinning contract.
You raise a really interesting point. I think the whole state of SLAs is absolutely disastrous right now in the industry. Again, there are people who've got it right and who are using them to great effect. Let's not take away from that. But I think in general, the term SLA, service level agreement, has been minimized into something. For example, in some organizations, the only time they use the term SLA is to complete the field in the incident record, which tells you how long you've got to respond to that incident. Right. It's not an SLA, that's a response time metric. If anything, it's an OLA, it's an operational level target even. It's not even an agreement. It's just, this is something, this is maybe you've agreed that with your customer, but it's just one simple metric. And I sometimes read questions online. It's like, so what SLAs do you use for change management? Why do you have any SLAs for change management? Surely your service level agreement should be for the service you're providing. Yes. Change management's not a service.
Nope.
It's something you do when somebody wants to change the service. The service is the service. Change management is an activity that you do to support that service. And by all means, you may need to have some times associated with how long it takes you to assess a change or to make a change. It's not a service level agreement.
No.
It's either a process metric or a process performance target. At best, it's an operational level agreement. It's not an SLA. So that's a little bit of a soapbox there
For both of us.
But in addition to that, I think the term SLA has been used so many confusing ways. For example, vendors will use the term service level agreement to refer to that part of the contract they have with you, which relates to service performance. That's always confused me. Contract is the contract.
Right.
Why do you separate financial terms and conditions from performance terms and conditions? Makes no sense whatsoever. You have a contract. You provide this service at this level for this cost and under these terms and conditions. It's a contract. And in ITIL, it's always been called an underpinning contract. Well, I saw a blog online the other day is, why are people still talking about underpinning contracts, OLAs and SLAs? This is the 21st century, for goodness sake. Okay, so you never have to worry about understanding what level of performance your customers need from a service, and you never have to commit to it because those are old-fashioned concepts. Well, maybe the format of the SLA has changed. Maybe it's not a formal agreement looking kind of document anymore. Maybe it's a set of metrics in a service description. I don't know. It has so many different forms these days, but the concept of agreeing what level of service you're going to be providing is fundamental. You cannot provide IT services unless you understand what level of service is going to be provided. And I'm going to go even further. Again, going to ITIL 4, and it was there before, but ITIL 4 really brought it out. They talked about the service provider relationship and the service consumption relationship. And they said in that relationship, there are responsibilities on both sides.
Agreed.
So you want to consume a service, you have to be able to do certain things under certain conditions to a certain level of performance. You want to deliver that service. The service provider has a set of responsibilities, and those responsibilities need to match up. How do you do that if you have no discussion between the consumer and the provider? What is that form called? What is the form of that discussion called? It's called agreeing the level of service that is going to be provided and consumed. It's a service level agreement. Again, I don't really care what format it's in. It could be a written piece of paper. It could be an online thing. That's not the important thing. The important thing is it covers both the consumer environment as well as the provider environment. And it is an agreement on how this is going to happen. We were speaking about some very simple examples. When we got together, one was an example in an organization I just worked in, where they had a maintenance schedule where changes were introduced at 2:00 on a Sunday morning, which sounds perfectly reasonable, except that major parts of the business had a shift change at 2:00 in the morning. And if you were busy maintaining systems that contained data that was critical for handover from one shift to the other, it was the worst possible thing you could do. So what did they do? They sat down and they said, okay, we won't do maintenance at 2:00 on a Sunday morning again. When would it work for you? 4:00 will be fine. Okay, well, we'll do it at 4:00. That's a service level agreement. Right?
Yes. Well, think about it this way, David. You and I met in a coffee shop bakery.
Yeah.
There are certain rules on which door you enter, how you order, and how you receive your goods. That's from the consumer. If I want food there or drink, I had iced tea, I have to do my part of those rules. They do their part. We have an agreement with an exchange. And the one fear I have, and this is just a fear, people would say, well, you can address it, is that if if there's large numbers that only go through ITIL 4 Foundation, and they look at the service value chain and it says engage, and it looks like there's a wall with, as it goes into obtain, build, and the others, that they don't see that engage as a swim lane all the way across, because it really is. You were talking about the co-creation, that engage is all the way from in the beginning, understanding the request or the demand, the opportunity, all the way through the delivery, as whatever word you want to use, like, here, we're handing this to you, go test it, make sure it's exactly the way you want it, and then we'll transfer it into operations. That's my fear. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've seen that happening in so many different frameworks. So a lot of frameworks will say, well, ITIL got it wrong, but we have the solution. Actually, none of them are dealing with it, because this is not a framework issue. It's a people issue, and it's it's how people interact with each other. So, for example, we talk about something that should have got this right, which is value stream mapping, which is a great concept, been around for years, and it is very effective in terms of tracking, what information is needed to provide a service or product, and what activities or steps need to be taken, and how to do those steps better, how to improve them and make sure that they're done efficiently and effectively. And it's a great technique. Unfortunately, if you don't go far enough, you end up with the same problem. You end up making a process or a product very efficient and very good, but which doesn't actually meet the needs of the customer.
Right.
And again, it's not a fault of value stream mapping. It's a great methodology. It's a great tool. It's a matter of how you apply it. It's a matter of taking it far enough. So I've gotten to calling it the 1+ value stream +1, because I want to make sure that we go one step further back the chain. Who was the one that supplied it to us, and what's in it for them? And who's the customer we're providing to, and what's in it for them? I know we don't control what our customer does, and we don't control what the vendor does, but we need to understand it if our services are going to be relevant. And that's, I think, I think we're going to see a lot more of that happening. I think we're starting to stress that. And why? Well, very simply because we have to. We had to do it in the pandemic, and a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, we're through the worst of the pandemic now. Now we're kind of fixing, where are we going from here? My belief is that the amount of change you're going to see after the pandemic is infinitely more turbulent than what we experienced during the pandemic.
100% agree, especially because budgets will be open. And whenever you give tech leaders budgets, innovation and speed to delivery. So as we try to wrap up this thought, and if we're moving in the right place, we're trying to do things right, how would we measure or know that we're doing well in making progress in that co-creation of value? Like, to me, everybody wants to talk about speed to delivery, all of that, and those are variables, but they're not measurements to me in terms of co-creation. You can correct me if you wish.
Well, no, I agree with you. So speed to delivery is very important, but does that achieve value? Not in and of itself.
Right.
It only achieves value if speed to delivery gets you to a customer ahead of your competitor.
Right.
So in order to understand if speed of delivery is a value contributing component, you have to understand who is your consumer, when are they asking for this, why do they need it, and who are your competitors, and how quickly are they able to get the product or service to the consumer. There's a bunch of other things that you need to know if you're going to look at back office type metrics. Another one, of course, is response time. Another one is availability. Yes. Right? Those don't tell you whether value's been achieved. They tell you whether an output was produced.
Yes.
Which again was, I think, version 2, ITIL version 2 was really focused on quality of output. It's great. It's what we needed at the time, to be honest, but we're not there anymore. Availability and response time, I'm sorry, but if you're still focused on how to achieve that, you're back office, right? You want to be front office, you've got to be able to talk in terms of who are your competitors? How are they achieving competitive advantage? How do we compete against them? And if you're a government agency, the same thing is true. Who are the citizens? What are their expectations? What rules are we applying that require them to get things done? And are we able to help them get those things done in the time that we need them to get done? It's an interesting one. The Dutch tax office, it went across there a few years back. We had a project going, and I was fascinated, because their primary driver for their projects that they were busy working on at the time was customer service. And I said, you're a tax office, you're the IRS. Why would you worry about customers? They don't have a choice, right? They're going to pay their taxes. And if they don't, you're going to come after them. And said, no, that's not how we do it. What we learned is that good customer service results in a higher compliance and higher pay, a higher instance of people paying their taxes, and a lower instance of people trying to avoid tax. So the Dutch tax office realized the value of having really good customer service, really cutting edge technology. And so for them, it was really important that it was easy to file taxes. So it's all online. As much of it is automated as possible, so that you don't have to go and look for your receipts and look for your notes. So it's all there. Now, of course, within reason of privacy laws and that kind of thing, well, you have to balance all that stuff. But that's the kind of discussion that a technology manager should be having with their business counterparts. How can we make it easier for our citizens to pay taxes?
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, there's some availability that's required. There's some response time that's required, but that's back office. The most important thing is how do we make it easy for them to submit tax returns? How do we make it easier for them to source the data that goes into those tax returns? And if we do have to come after them because they forgot something, how do we make that a pleasant experience? And I looked at the rooms where they sit down with their non-compliant customers. Amazing, just very comfortable. Coffee, snacks. It's like. Okay, so
there's a limit there, right? There's a limit to like which jail would you like, this one or that one?
There is definitely a limit to it, and I think
what I mean.
It's the Dutch tax. It's a Dutch tax service, and I can tell you that once it gets over that limit, it's you don't want to be there, right? So there's a carrot and stick, definitely. But the interesting thing to me is that when we start talking about value, this is not just something that applies to commercial organizations. It applies to government organizations and NGOs as well.
Oh, yeah. So when you were talking, since we ate in a bakery, I like sandwich shops just because I like the counter service type of places. And so I have an analogy for you, and I want to run it by you. So let's say I get a sandwich. We're at that same bakery, coffee shop, and we stay for lunch, and I get a sandwich. And I don't like tomatoes. I don't like raw onions. So I say, hold those. That's my part of the consumer, right? I'm like, I want it in this way, but not that way. I want it on this type of bread. I want it hot, not cold, so on and so forth. I pay the money. I get so I'm helping with that value creation. Then when it arrives, I look at it, I'm like, it still has onions, or no, it doesn't. Still part of that QA process because I'm involved all the way through. That's how I see all of this value co-creation. Whereas in the past, if we were the bakery, may have measured how long wait time to order, ease of ordering, how quickly did you get your food? Was the food right? The right, whatever you want to say, was it the right order? Did it, all that stuff. And I would just say, there's so much more to that, that we need that co-creation to be able to understand.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on something which is really important, and I guess people are calling it experience right now, which has to do with those parts of the service that cannot be measured by a tool.
Yes.
It's and we sometimes call it customer satisfaction. That's not good enough. Were you satisfied with that sandwich? Yes, but it still had onions on it. No, so I wasn't that satisfied. Okay, so it's like, well, how do you figure out whether what the person expected when they ordered that sandwich was what was given? And if they were unable to communicate it effectively, and as a result were disappointed, how do I address that? How do I facilitate future communication to make sure that experience is, first of all, that the expectation is properly communicated and that I'm able to meet their experience more effectively. Experience is about feeling, it's about emotion, as well as the hard, cold facts of what I got.
Right.
It's about happiness. It's about what's the opposite of disappointment? Appointment. It's about whether they are disgruntled or gruntled. It's very subjective.
Oh, yeah.
And value is very subjective. So, you raised the restaurant analogy, which is a really good one. We talk about value. What is the value of one restaurant versus another? So if we go and eat at that bakery and we have a cup of coffee and a sandwich, guaranteed you can get that same sandwich at a 3-star Michelin restaurant.
Right.
It's going to cost you 10 times more. What's the difference? What's more valuable in one experience versus the other? Because if the food is very similar, maybe higher quality ingredients, I don't know, but that only accounts for a fraction of the price differential. What is it that I value so much about eating at that 3-star Michelin restaurant in comparison to eating at the corner bakery that wasn't the name of the bakery, by the way, but the bakery on the corner where we went to eat? What is it that we value? And that differential is not something that a tool can measure.
Correct. And that's where we're off on that SLA stuff. I think we only measure. All right, I'm going to get soapbox here for you, David. We only measure what we measure now because it's what a tool can measure. We only blame the tool implementer because we can't blame ourselves. And to take that a step further, when you said value is subjective, so it's cleanliness of that restaurant, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's subjective. And you'll remember this. There was a soccer team of 14-year-old girls having a birthday party clapping. You and I found it funny. But the old people in there, they did not find that funny. They did, like, what's this racket going on?
No, we came in early on a Saturday morning because we wanted some peace and quiet to catch up with our buddies that we haven't seen for the rest of the week. And here are these teenage kids yelling their heads off.
It's subjective, right? It's subjective. And that's where I think, whether we talk experience or service levels or whatever it is, it's that engage all the way through.
Exactly.
Is the key ingredient, right? Is that bakery on the corner has to know what the cleanliness level expected is and deliver that, or whatever it is, and engage all the way through.
That's right. So what is it that our customer needs in order to be successful? And my expectation is that within the IT industry, we're going to start seeing those IT professionals who find themselves more embedded in the business becoming more business specialists, which means if you compare it to 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even today, you can be an IT person and you can work in any type of organization. But I foresee, and I don't think it's too far in the future, I foresee a situation where in certain categories of IT, you have to be a banking IT person to get the job. Another bank, you won't be able to go and work for an airline because the business is so different. So I certainly see that IT is going to be headed in that direction, specifically because we need people who understand how to engage with that business user, with that business unit, with that customer, who really understands the business and who understands the technology components and is able to bring the two together. And that requires in-depth knowledge of the business, and it requires a level of engagement that you can't get if you are an AI specialist or a security specialist.
Right. And take that a step further. Those people may be in IT and not know a lick about technology. Their role may be, how do I explain this to my business people and be that translator, if you will, or, business requirements. They may not know how to stand up a server, but that's okay. You know what I'm saying?
Right, absolutely. And so we're starting to see that happening. Now, I will say, let's not get people too frightened about this, that, you're not going to have to look for a new job in the next year.
No.
I think there are some things that we can do today that will go such a long way to resolving this. I remember working in a manufacturing organization. It was a company, and there were some issues on a factory floor, IT issues. Turned out that IT thought they weren't IT issues, but they really were. And when we sat down, it became clear who was responsible for the issues, and IT had to stand up. And I asked a very innocent question. I said to the factory manager, how many times have you actually spoken to an IT person in the last year? And they said, well, 3. And I went back into IT and I said to the people in the room, it was a sort of, it wasn't a big company, but it wasn't small either. I got as many IT people as I was meeting with at the time. And I said, how many of you have been into a factory? Put your hands up. 4 or 5 people put their hands up. It was less than 20%.
Right.
That had actually been into a factory. And here they were trying to support the lifeblood of this company. Like, well, but you don't even understand the first thing about your business. You've never even got out from behind your desk and gone onto the factory floor. So for me, excuse me while I just clear my, for me, don't go rushing out and getting a new job all of a sudden and try and become an IT business specialist. They don't exist yet. But do get out from behind your desk and go and sit down with somebody at your level in the business. Actually, I said that in one presentation, and somebody asked the question, that's easy to say, but who do we meet with? I'm like, they got a point. It is at that level that people in IT do not know if they have to pick up the phone and talk to somebody who that person would be. The only thing I can say is, find somebody at the same level as you or higher in the organization. And make an appointment, go and sit down. It doesn't matter where you start, doesn't matter who they are. Just go and sit down and start. And, talk to them about stuff that's important to them. Like, what do you do in your department? Explain how that works. What kind of skills do people need to work in your department? Just simple stuff.
What's on your roadmap? The one that gets me is, what are your capabilities you're wanting to do?
Right.
And your question about where in the organization for the business, I'd look at who calls the service desk for your area and start with them. Whoever it is calling the service desk, you can look at the org chart to see where they fall. But if they're calling, if you're an Oracle database person, whoever's calling the service desk for your area would be a great person for you to talk to.
Exactly. What do you find frustrating about IT in this organization? That's a great one.
Oh, that one's the one that gets, the other one that gets me, David, is to ask an IT leader, so how is it, what's it like consuming your IT services? Usually, if they're being candid with you, there'll be, it's not very good, or, even if they do say it's good, you say, what do your peers say? You know what I mean? You can have that dialogue.
Well, and that's always an interesting question, because it's actually skewed. It's a bit of an unfair question because, in a sense, because, people report what is not working. They don't report what is working. Right. And those of us on the operations, in the operations side of the house, if there is such a thing anymore, this is a particular challenge for us. I remember I was with David Wielden, who co-wrote the service operation book in version 3, the 2007 edition. And we were at a conference, and David always surprised me. I never knew what was going to come out of his mouth when he stood up there. And I have great stories to tell about that. But in this one particular occasion, he stood up and we had the presentation, and he said, just put that presentation on hold for a minute. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what's coming next. And he said, a lot of people have asked me what you're going to get out of the new service operation book. He said, well, let me tell you, nothing. I'm like, David, thank you very much. He said, no incidents, no disruption, no complaints. He said, none of that. In fact, you will not even know that we're there because everything will be working 100%. And that's a difficult one because, you fully appreciate the value of something when it's not there.
Right.
But when it's always there and it works 100% perfectly, it's a little bit more difficult to say, hey, look at everything we do for you.
Exactly. And, like it's the difference. Only somebody in operations knows the difference between 3 nines and 5 nines.
Right.
Because you ask somebody on the street, what's 99.9 or 99.999? They're like, hey, it's all the same. You ask somebody in operations and they start getting twitchy, right? Because that's a big difference in their expectations.
And a big difference in their budget too.
Yes, very much because of redundancy. All right.
Right.
This is awesome conversation. We'll switch gears. And you are an author on the digital and IT strategy ITIL 4 book. What's that process like? Because I know people are anxious to hear, the process of going through that. Plus, what's next for you, Mr. David Cannon?
So I assume you asked me what was the process like of actually writing that book.
Oh, yes.
And it was just hugely exciting, challenging, and valuable. So just to put it in perspective, we started writing that book really in February of 2020.
Wow.
We still had an idea that we would be getting together for a workshop in April so that we could all get around the table and put our heads together and throw some ideas around. Well, of course, that didn't happen. And instead, what happened is we had this collaboration, this virtual collaboration across multiple countries, multiple time zones. And we were being forced to write about something as it was going down. I say forced, of course, it wasn't being forced, but I mean, we didn't have a choice. Right? So we're writing about digital strategy. Well, in the early stages of lockdown, digital was the way you stayed in business. So what we were writing about, and I mean, the fun thing was, if you can call it fun, was that we were able to observe firsthand what was happening, right? We could see immediately, what was working and what wasn't working. And we could immediately get some understanding of what a digital strategy was. But at the same time, very little that we were doing or anybody was doing at that stage was strategic.
Right.
I mean, we were just trying to figure out how we were going to stay in business for another week.
Yes.
And that's hugely different than talking about digital strategy. But as it turns out, we started realizing that the whole characteristic of digital and IT strategy is about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, VUCA. And VUCA became one of the core points of that book. And it was something we had to keep saying. Digital technology is not just about finding new technology to do the things we've already been doing. It is about changing the way we work. It's about changing our business model. It's about changing our operating model. It's about changing our behavior. It's about changing who our customers are and what services we deliver to them and how we deliver those services to them. Digital technology and digital strategy is about a fundamental shift in the way the industry works. And that was what was, I think, the most exciting part of the book. It was also the most challenging part because really, I have to be honest, none of us, and we had several experts on the authoring team and the advisory team, and none of us were experts in what was going down.
Right. Nobody was. Nobody was.
And we're still not. And yet we had to write an authoritative work on how that was going to play. I have to say that anybody who says they're an expert in digital technology and digital strategy, nobody is, because it's just changing so quickly. Are there experts in how to roll with those changes? Yes, there are, and we learn from it every day. But every single day on that project was a learning experience for me, and I know for the rest of the team. We would meet as authors. There were 7 authors on that book, and we would meet every single week and just talk about what we were writing and, whether that was even still relevant anymore. Wow. And challenging each other.
Yes.
But that's not going to work. We thought that was true. That's just not true anymore. So what is it? It was an amazing experience. Frustrating, challenging. Yeah, I have to say, for all of the benefits of virtual working and collaboration, there's still nothing that beats a physical meeting.
Agree.
When you're trying to brainstorm things
Agree.
and get agreement on things.
Yeah.
We certainly missed that.
Vibe in a room is so, even the, just the energy level of a room helps carry things.
Yeah.
You can feel it without, you put somebody in a room blindfolded, they could tell what the energy in that room is.
That's exactly right. Now, I will say we've gotten a lot better at being,
Yes.
we've adjusted and adapted incredibly well to these virtual environments. But nonetheless, I think there is, in some situations, there is no substitute for people meeting each other. And my firm belief is when we talk about organizations and companies, what we're talking about is people doing stuff for other people. That's what the world is about. And okay, so we formed companies that enable us to do that. It's about people doing stuff for other people. And to me, the most important element of any organization is the people and what it is that they're doing for other people. That's what it's all about to me. And for me, when we're talking about digital strategy, the danger is that we get sucked down this rabbit hole of technology for the sake of technology's sake. Yeah. One of the very first questions we got when we started writing this book is, I'm so glad you're writing this book. Are you going to be talking about how I define an AI strategy? And my answer was absolutely not. We will not be discussing how to define an individual technology strategy. We will be talking about how you use technology in the process of becoming and being a successful business or a successful organization.
Oh, yeah.
Whether that is AI, machine learning, big data, or collaboration software. How do you go about figuring out what is needed and making sure that you're able to find what is needed, and and also how do you need to become culturally different? And that was something that I learned through this whole process, was that digital technology is not just about doing the same things with new technology. It is about doing completely different things in completely different ways.
Yep. But it gets back to the value co-creation, like we were talking about, right? Yeah. It's all about if I'm a service provider, me aligning what I offer to those that may consume my services. And it's that calibration, recalibration. Are we, like a kid in the car, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Right. I mean, we have to recalibrate all the time, because as you mentioned, everything's moving so fast. We're talking machine learning today, but it may be something different next year. And so we have to move past we look at, all right, here's my I love analogies. I love illustrations. We look at everything like it's a snapshot when it's really a movie. And we have to look at it all the way through, not these little bits in time.
Right. I fully agree with you. It's, front to back understanding of what is going on. And I use that very deliberately, front meaning the business end of your organization, yes, and back being the supporting part of your organization and your vendors that support you. Really understanding the full picture of what it is your organization tries to do. And if you think you can do that by just simply being a better help desk, you're not.
Right.
And that's another thing that I've learned is that, and remember, I come out of this world, I come out of the IT operations world, and help desks and service desks are incredibly important to me. But what I've come to realize is that we always thought that the service desk was a huge value provider. What I've come to realize is that the service desk can only be a value provider if it directly supports a business outcome. If all we're doing is break fix, we're not providing value. What we're doing is we're fixing stuff that should have been providing value, but which now isn't.
Right. You can only be neutral. You can never be positive. You can only be neutral at best.
You can only be neutral, and chances are you probably won't even be that, because you're on the receiving end of the complaints.
Right.
And so you're having to represent an IT department, which may or may not be at fault.
Right.
But as far as that consumer is concerned, is definitely at fault.
Right. I may have forgotten to say no onions. I get my sandwich that has onions on it. And I say something to the person that brought me the food. They're not the one that took my order. I didn't say it, but they're the one that delivers it and gets yelled at, right? Even though I'm not a yeller.
Right. So yeah, having that full picture, I think, is very important. And again, understanding that the service desk is not a service. Right. It is an organization that takes reports about services that are not working.
Or to deliver fulfillment. So we just have a few more minutes.
Right.
And so in foundations, I assume a lot of people will go through it the next year or so. So we have service value chain, service value system, really service value system, then embedded is the chain. What are some of the common misunderstandings, misconceptions about that operating model, ecosystem, whatever you want to call it? Because to me, I think it's widely misunderstood. And let me tee you up. Value streams. How do you put value streams inside of that? That's an interesting one. And so, I mean, there's a lot of these that people fly through a foundations class and it may get 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and and they're not going to understand it fully. So since you're one of the ITIL 4 authors, I'm teeing it up for you.
And so bear in mind, those were created by the time we started on the DITS book, but okay. I have to say for many IT professionals, those two concepts are going to just sort of fly by. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to focus on the thing that's really important to me, which may be change management or creating a new service or whatever the case may be. But the way in which those are governed and managed will not necessarily be of the highest level of interest to me. To make it very simple, the service value system is the governance, right? It's how you manage your organization to be viable, to be successful. Whereas the service value system is the things you have to manage in order to achieve that. And those two fit very closely together. I wouldn't go so far as to say one is a business model and one is an operating model. I think I don't go that far either. That's not true.
No, but in my book, which I very much want to give you kudos for giving me a call out on the book
this is the book, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I called it like a subway system is the service value system, and a service value chain is how you get through that system to your destination.
That's right. And so if you were to talk about value streams, a value stream would be a number of activities and processes, if you like, that enable you to flow through.
Yeah. How do I get to work?
Stages. Yeah, exactly.
How do I get to work? That meant, though, I may have to change cars. I might have to wait. I might have to buy additional tickets or tokens. It's how do I get to work?
Right. So the service value system describes how value streams are managed. Basically, that's what it does. One of the things that a lot of people who read ITIL 4 say, well, where are the processes? That is ITIL. Where are the processes? And now I read the books and not a single process in any of the books. Well, actually, Axelos did something really smart and I think fantastic, is they took the processes and put them online and made them available on a subscription so they could update them frequently. The books that we read are about really how you manage your organization to get the best out of your processes.
Right.
And of course, they changed the process because, of course, we all knew they were not all processes, but we just called them that. I used to prefer calling them disciplines. They weren't even disciplines. But, for example, capacity management is not a single process.
No.
Incident management maybe, but,
asset isn't either, right?
No, exactly. Exactly.
It's a bunch of different processes rolled into one, just like capacity.
That's right. And so they stopped calling them processes. They call them practices now, which is really what they are. And those practices are what we use to help fuel that value stream that runs through the service value chain.
Oh, yeah.
It's those two concepts, whether you use those terms and those diagrams or not, the two concepts are incredibly important for managers and executives. You have to have some version of those somewhere in your organization. You have to have you have to have governance, you have to have management, and you have to know what the use cases are that you're going to be using your services for, and use your practices for. And that's really what those two mechanisms help you to achieve.
So I'm big on the governance and the improvement. I'll give you two that I think people will struggle with. It says obtain, build, and it could be obtain and build and obtain and build, because you think of, if you're putting an ERP system live, you're obtaining a lot and you're building a lot.
Yep.
And it's going to be iterative, because you're going to do it you're not going to do big bang, you're going to do it iteratively. So I think there's some thought of those value streams. And the other is, you don't have to go all the way through that and use, obtain and build and all the other pieces. You may just obtain and build and then put it live, right? Because you may buy it off you buy some SaaS solution and push it live. You don't have to go each step. Like, it is a process, to your point.
Well, I mean, subscription software is a really good example of this, right? It's there. You need it? Okay. Here's your license. Done.
Right. There's no deliverance support. You know what I mean? There's no, this is my point though, is people have to not look at it so linearly. It's not do this, then do this, then do this. It might be iteratively, or it might be obtain support. Now we're done.
Well, there's a great diagram, I think it's even in the foundation book, of a value stream that goes through the service value chain, and it kind of wanders all over.
I could see that, but you understand, those are misconceptions. I think we're pushing a bunch of people through foundations. We're not going very deep because we got to do it in 2 or 3 days.
And I have to say, I think part of the problem is a lot of the people, we're putting through foundations, and it's really important that they understand the concepts. But who those two specific diagrams and concepts are aimed at are the executives and managers, especially the senior managers. And unfortunately, we're not seeing enough of those people going through these courses. They're assuming, again, that the people they send on these courses will bring back the concepts that are needed and they'll just be executed, but that's beneath them.
Right.
And this has been an issue with ITIL and in many other frameworks over the years, is that if I'm a leader, the discussion about frameworks is something I hand off to my architects and my managers.
Yes.
It's not something that I have to be worried about. In actual fact, ITIL from the very beginning was designed to be used and directed by the CIO of the organization, not by the operations director.
Right.
And yet, how many CIOs have actually, now again, I don't expect that every CIO needs to read all of the books, but the task, the responsibility of managing and delivering services that create value within your organization is directly the responsibility of the CIO.
Agreed. And the guiding principles are written at the executive level. If we're going on ITIL Forward Talk, that's not at the junior server admin. This is at the executive level to focus on value, progress iteratively with feedback, and on, right? That's right. Executive conversation.
That's right. And yet the first reaction of most CIOs is, oh, you need to go on this certificate. It's fine. Get the certificate, come tell me how it was.
Exactly.
And by the way, when you come back, implement it.
Yes.
I may be exaggerating a bit, but I have seen that scenario play itself out so many times, and it does a disservice to the organization.
To everybody, right? Because then when it flops, they're like, ITIL stinks. I can't believe whatever training company, they didn't teach us right. You know what I mean? And
that's right.
It's like, there's the irony of ironies is there's some co-creation of value between the training company and the way it's implemented in an organization. There's some implied co-creation there.
Of course. I mean, I read a number of articles over the years, and they all have this common theme. ITIL is deficient. ITIL sucks. ITIL is dead. Choose your variation. Right. This has been since, by the way, first one I read of this was in 1993.
Wow.
ITIL is dead was the headline that I read. What it boils down to is that the person making the criticism is basing their criticism not on having read the information themselves, but on observing a company that implemented it, usually unsuccessfully. And it is an attempt to replace ITIL / whatever it is they're criticizing with something else.
Right.
When you look at what that something else is, invariably, it has fewer of the components that you would find in the original framework. And you know, I think most people are smart enough to say, you know, whenever they read that, it's a little bit of hype.
Right.
But nonetheless, I think there are a lot of people that are believing that hype right now, especially about ITIL.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, well, you know, ITIL just doesn't work.
Oh, yeah.
No, ITIL shouldn't work. It's a set of books, for goodness sake.
Right.
It has guidelines.
It's people. We live in a clickbait society, though. So it's hard. The signal to noise ratio is really difficult for most people that are sincerely trying to listen to try to discern what's noise versus what's signal. I mean, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And so, David, it's been great having you on. So David and I could have these conversations all day. At least I would enjoy it. He'd get tired of me probably soon. And so you're welcome back anytime. We'll continue on this conversation. Next time, I need to remember to set you up on telling the story of how you got into the service management ITIL world. Great story. But so I'm sure the audience is going to be like, those that aren't familiar with you are like, hey, that's a great non-British accent with great knowledge. How can I get in touch with this guy? David, how can they?
They can get in touch. Probably the easiest and best way is just look for me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me, send a connection request. You know, I'm happy to talk with people who are passionate about this subject. And I am now, of course, a Texan, although there's no such thing as a Texan unless you were born here, I'm told. But I'm as Texan as I can be. Been here for nearly 20 years. I still haven't got the accent. I just can't get it right, so I don't even try.
Or the big hat. You don't have the big hat either.
I don't have the big hat. I do have a pair of boots and a belt buckle, which are pretty cool. But no, don't have the big hat. I need to do that because I need protection. But no, LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me. And as you were, if you're in town, give me a shout. I really love talking through this. This is not only my career, it is my passion. It is, when we talk about how I got into this industry, you will understand exactly why that is. This is such a cool space to be in right now. So, do look me up. Do so. David was very hospitable to me. David, thank you for joining us. It's been a great discussion. It's gone by quickly for me. And like I said, we'll have you on very soon. Thanks, Jeffrey. Yeah, over way too quickly, but then I did most of the talking. Sorry about that. Oh, it's awesome. I just get so excited. It's, yeah. They hear me all the time. It's great for them to hear you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.